to the Fantasy Source Baseball Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, sitting here with George Winkler, and today we have a painful subject. That was a terrible lead-in, wasn't it? That was just terrible. Well, we're going to be talking about players coming off of injuries or who are dealing with nagging injuries and giving some tips to fantasy owners about how to deal with them. Let's start out with the pitchers. Ubaldo Jimenez, the latest news that we've heard from him is that he had a really badly damaged cuticle, so I think the exact term was, and that it's bad enough that he had to miss some time, go on the DL, and it probably won't heal entirely until he can just let it go all off season. So how does that change what your outlook is on Ubaldo for the rest of the season?
Well, I think that's the fine line you have to walk with pitching because, it was an injury to his hand. You said his cuticle, and, pitching is such a fine art. He needs his hands to be 100% healthy in order to make the ball do what he was doing last year when he got off to such a great start. So we saw him get knocked around in the first inning against the Giants, but then he settled down and actually ended up, with 6 strikeouts in 5 innings. Not too bad. And we think he'll be better in his next starts. He has a 2-start week coming up against the Cubs and the Pirates. So, we see a guy like Brandon Morrow who's ready to be activated this week against the Rays, and the Jimenez lesson that we can take forward is, well, maybe with the pitchers I need to wait like one start just to see where he's at after he's back from the injury.
Now, how much research and knowledge do you try to gather about the specific injury that the guy has? For instance, we often talk about how Tommy John surgery, even when a guy comes back, it's fairly common knowledge. He doesn't really have the feel just yet, and he's not going to be himself for yet another season, or at least needs a lot of time pitching in order to feel himself. What about these smaller injuries where it's like an elbow or it's the cuticle?
Well, everybody's different, but in general, I've noticed over the years in baseball that it's with the hands and the arms and the wrists that you have the most worry, especially with batters and the wrists because, they're rolling over, they're trying to generate power. But again, everybody's individual. You want to check how they're doing if they have a minor league rehab assignment. Are they tearing the cover off the ball? Are they striking out every time? Jason Bay, a guy who's coming back today, and I have in my lineup, was 4 for 4 in one of his games down in the minor league. So that was a good indication to me that, he's ready to come back from his oblique injury that sidelined him to this point.
No, he's a buy low category type guy anyway, a high upside, low risk guy, in that hopefully he comes somewhere close to what he did 3 years ago without it, and just completely ignores that he was a terrible player the past couple of years or last year, whatever I don't remember the exact years he was being terrible. Do you treat him differently than you would someone like Johnny Damon or Seth Smith, who, while having limitations of their own, have had more success recently than he has?
It depends. With Bay, you could argue that the whole career is better than that. It's definitely better than that of Seth Smith.
Yes.
And Seth Smith is a good example of a guy where I totally got it wrong this week. He's coming back from a groin injury. He's facing Matt Cain, who he has no success against. Mm-hmm. And then yesterday he goes out and goes 2 for 3 with 3 runs and 2 RBIs, and he's on my bench. So this is the game you're playing with these injuries. Now with Bay, I think he'll be okay. Like I said, he did well in the minors on his rehab. They're going to put him in the middle of that lineup, and the hope is that, maybe last year with the concussion and the first year in Citi Field, maybe he can do what David Wright did, bounce back, get it going. He's a little bit older than David Wright, so I wouldn't expect total bounce back, but I think he is a buy low guy.
Now, none of those guys are a player of the caliber of Chase Utley, who we still expect is going to come back at some point this season. For those who bought him at a low price in auction leads or drafted him really late in snake drafts, how would you counsel them to treat Utley when he actually comes back? Because I suspect that there are going to be a lot of people that figure to themselves, you know what? Chase Utley at 75% is still better than random guy off the waiver wire.
And that's what I would say too, is when a guy of his caliber comes back and he says he's ready, you put him in. because he's going to do things, or he has the ability to do things that other people don't. And Utley's a guy that, yeah, you just have to eat that spot, the DL spot. You just have to grin and bear it. Now, maybe with a guy who's his teammate, Brad Lidge, who's not going to be back until the All-Star break at the earliest, maybe you start to say, well, how long can I hold on to this guy? And it really is just a case-by-case basis. Are you starting to lose contact in the standings? Are you taking a zero every week because you're taking this injury guy on? So, just keep a close eye on it. There is a time when you have to cut some of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, with Lidge, saves are saves no matter who gets them. But at a certain point, you do have to kind of realize to yourself, if it comes August, say, if you really want to look far ahead and he's still not back, you tell yourself, you know what, he's going to come back, he's going to pitch. Odds are he's not really going to, he might not even get the closer job back during the regular season. They may just be thinking, well, we're going to hope we get him back for the playoffs.
Yeah, and his situation reminds me a lot of what happened with Brandon Webb and people who had Carlos Beltran last year. And boy, those guys thought it was a good idea to add him in the draft because they got him at a bargain basement price. But then as the season drags on, they just sit there on your roster doing nothing. But you don't want to get rid of him because you know some other opportunistic guy is out there ready to pounce on him. But I'm telling you guys, it's a terrible thing to get these injured players right off the bat and to wait for them all season. And then, like you say, you get 2 weeks of Carlos Beltran at the end of the season for all of your trouble.
You might even say a roster space is a terrible thing to waste.
A roster space is a terrible thing to waste, yes.
All right, George. Well, thanks for the advice. I know I'm going through some of that with some of the guys that I've got. Franklin Gutierrez, he's going to the Mayo Clinic. Joe Mauer. They fit into those different categories. Where Mauer, as soon as he comes back, he's going right into my lineup. Gutierrez, I like the steals potential, but, stomach issues, he might. We just got to wait and see. Let him play for a week before we put him in there.
Well, no pun intended, but I couldn't stomach having him on one of my rosters any longer. I finally had to cut the poor guy.
That was even worse than a roster space. It's a terrible thing to waste. All right, George. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.